Have you ever wondered how technology could simplify the complexities of home ownership? Imagine a world where managing your home's maintenance, expenses and records all becomes a seamless, integrated experience. Well, today on Tech Talks Daily, I'm going to dive into the heart of an innovative prop tech company with Daniel Smith and Jillian Harris. They're the dynamic co-founders of a company called Keepingly. And this cutting-edge platform is not just revolutionizing home ownership management. I think it's more challenging our conventional perspectives and practices. So Daniel brings a fervent advocacy for better housing policies, while Jillian's background in home and lifestyle infuses a unique flair into the venture. And together, they're not just redefining property technology, but they're championing diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, and bringing it into the world of housing. So how does Keepingly aim to transform the homeowner's journey? And what does this mean for the future of housing policies and equity? Well, let's find out. Buckle up and hold on tight, because wherever you're listening in the world, I'm going to be simultaneously, as my friends in the US would say, I'm going to be beaming your ears all the way to the UK, to Miami and Brooklyn, New York at the exact same time. But enough from me. Let's get today's guests on. So a massive warm welcome to the show. I've got two guests joining me today. Daniel, to begin with, can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, so I'm Daniel Smith. I am the founder of Keepingly. So I have spent 20 years in technology, starting all the way at the bottom rung of web development and now, working my way up, doing everything from product management, product development, and now building a startup that is focused on the homeownership space. So we are focused on really helping homeowners to be able to manage what, for most of us, is our largest asset, which is our home. So I am the founder of Keepingly, and that's, my introduction, I guess.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you join us today, Daniel. And Jillian, it's great to have you here too. Could you tell everyone listening a little about who you are too and what you do?
So thanks so much for having us, Neil. I'm Jillian Harris, as you know. I'm a creative director and product designer, UX designer. I started off in the industry 25 years ago when none of this existed, and so have just been working my way through the inventions, right? Because when I started, the internet didn't exist either. And I think I just aged myself, but that's okay.
Well, you're in good company now. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm conscious will be a lot of people listening, hearing about Keepingly for the very first time. So how would you introduce listeners to it? What separates you from all the other solutions out there? What makes you stand out? And
Keepingly is a platform that is focused on helping homeowners to manage, maintain, and grow the value of their asset. For me, the way that we've really thought about it is really from a consumer perspective. If I kind of go back into our backstory and why I started this ultimately, for me as a homeowner, I would be consulting and, as a homeowner, you put your documents somewhere. We all know they're somewhere, but when they need to be found, that somewhere, you don't know where that somewhere is. So started, traveling, doing a bunch of work. And then, one day my wife would say, hey, do you know where this document is? And I'm like, somewhere in the pile of documents where we put them. And she's like, well, I need it now. I'm like, well, you can't find it now because I'm not there. And so you need to go through the pile of documents. So, after a while, and I think it dovetailed with me because actually I was working in a telecom at the time as a product manager. And one of the things that we were supposed to, I really was tasked with doing was looking at the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things promised us a lot of things and a lot of solutions, but I found that it never really materialized for the end consumer. And so really thinking of it, I was like, why isn't there a solution when I'm away so that my wife can be able to find all these documents or we have them in a centralized place? And so, but one of the things that as a founder, you doubt yourself sometimes. So I was like, well, maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe, there's a solution out there that people are using that I'm not aware of. So I started, talking to all of my friends who are homeowners too and saying, how do you manage? How do you do XYZ in your home? How do you just really keep everything straight? And everybody was like, yeah, well, it's just a hodgepodge of solutions. Or I have some things in the cloud. I have stuff there. I have stuff in a folder. I have stuff. And I'm like, okay, I don't know that this is sustainable. So that was like the moment I was like, okay, well, I have some technical experience. I've done product management on some of these things. Maybe it's time to go start something and build something. So, 2 years later, 3 years in, this is, kind of where we are. But that is, the backstory and, what inspired us to kind of build Keepingly. And I'm showing Jillian now because, somewhere along the line, building the first version and met up with Jillian. And then we just was like, okay. And Jillian has a fantastic background. She kind of undersold herself, but she's done some fantastic work. And so ultimately, I was like, yeah, I need somebody who understands this to make this look better and has a different perspective than myself. So, Jillian, you could jump in and talk about your own experience, I guess.
Yeah, I remember when, Daniel and I met just commenting on similar posts on LinkedIn, actually. Yeah. And we had a very similar perspective when he shared the concept with me. Like, it just resonated with me immediately because I'm a female homeowner, right? And so I have not documents in different places. I have like a rolling suitcase type thing of documents that is like a ton heavy, like it weighs a ton. And I look at it all the time and I'm like, if I have to like run for my life somewhere, can't carry this.
Yeah.
I know where everything is, but in the moment of an emergency, I can't carry it. What resonated with me as well is like, again, as a female homeowner, doing maintenance, having maintenance people in the apartment, in my home. You don't know them. They don't know you. You don't know anything about what they're supposed to do. So you don't know if you're getting value, if they're doing it well, if they're doing it, and what he showed me as the initial concept really spoke to all of those pain points, So I was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer for me in terms of jumping on board and helping out. And then, of course, from an experience perspective, just having something that's intuitive and beautiful and modern looking, just to help users along the way. I describe myself to Daniel as like being a very timid homeowner. I've owned my home for about 13 years now, yeah. But I still very much want someone to like hold my hand and say, hey, do this thing. So I think I come to it from that experience, from the perspective of building something that really helps homeowners through the journey. He talked about the home being the asset, and I had not thought about homeownership in that way before. So it's definitely a shift in perspective, right? Your home, when you're a woman, your home is a place that you decorate and you cook and you have, I hate to say that, but like that's the reality of it, right? I had never really thought of it as an asset, and it's the largest asset most of us will ever own, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I absolutely love the backstory of both of you there. Incredibly cool origin stories. And fast forward to 2024, of course, Keepingly is hugely successful. So for people listening, maybe they're on your website checking it out while listening to our conversation today, what would you say those unique features and benefits of the platform are?
So in 2024, with a few hundred users, and adding more and getting ready to unveil version 2 of our platform, what we pride ourselves on is the ability to provide transparency in the whole homeowning process, the ability to give people and persons who are on the platform just the way to be able to navigate. So some of those is that we've built a checklist of items that homeowners should be going through on a quarterly basis, I guess, because it's it's divided based on the season. So each quarter you have a different checklist or different list of items. I live in Florida, so one of the things, I don't have snow. I don't have winter too much, and that looks very different from a homeowner who lives on the Northeast. So, I just came back from the snow. And so, that is a very different, home ownership experience. But, at the end of the day, being able to have the details of what you have done and what you need to be thinking of in your journey is really one of those things. So for us, skippingly starts off as centralized. And I'm going to just kind of give broad features, and Jillian will kind of dive into, because Jillian heads up product. I'm big vision, maybe big headed kind of guy. I don't know. So, but, one of those things, it's like being able to have a centralized place where you keep everything. So for us, people have asked us, hey, how are you different from like a Dropbox or Google where I just put my documents? Well, what we'd say is that, when you go into Google or Dropbox, one of the things you have to remember is, what did you name that document? Or, being able to itemize the documents either based on dates or whatever. But in keepingly, what we're saying is that, hey, here's what we specifically dedicated to your home ownership journey, because the home ownership journey is like having a baby. When you get a baby, you never get an instruction manual. Yep. It's like, hey, new parent, you go home with the baby. And home ownership is kind of like that, we have realized. And so what we have started really focusing on is, how do we centralize this journey, give you the details and the documents, but ultimately really helping you giving you the details to make the best decision. And Jillian can dive into like some of the upcoming features, because we are on the verge of releasing version 2 of the platform, and those come with some really unique features. Some of the things that we've added based on user feedback, what we've been hearing from some of our customers and our users. And so we are going to expand, in a few weeks that launches. And so it really is, again, doubling down just on that homeowner journey and that homeowner experience.
And that's that hand holding, that experience, that homeownership manual is core to it. Another thing that is core to our ethos is homeownership sustainability, right? So all of the features that we will, and functionality that we will roll out will evolve around how do we best achieve that, right? Daniel talked about the documenting of the home and making that accessible to the user. But then what do we do with that data, in phase 3 and 4? How are we analyzing that data to ensure that the user is managing this asset, right? So we're at the first phase of getting them to put in all of the information. And then, again, how do we use technology to give guided recommendations about what you should do? Daniel talked about the maintenance. He talked about geolocating the homeowner. So they're like the maintenance is one aspect of it, but then push notifications that are time specific or relevant to what the homeowner is going through in that time and place. Example, a hurricane is coming, right? Maybe you walk around your house and take some pictures. Make sure you have your insurance documents uploaded in the app. In the case of anything happens, you are prepared. And so it's that sort of hand-holding homeownership Bible that we're trying to create for the user, so that it becomes second nature to them, because we really do have to change their behavior, right? It's most people, you buy a home and that's it, and so it's really about changing the behavior and guiding them through that.
I love the whole concept and what you're doing here, and be able to manage everything from your device, whichever you've got closest to hand. And Daniel, you've been a strong advocate for better housing policies. So I'm curious, how does Keepingly contribute to that advocacy?
Great question. Man, ultimately, Keepingly is built on policy. I won't say that that's where we started, but we have evolved into that. one of our first advisors, was a policy, advisor. And so he worked for some of the largest organizations. And so, really sitting with him and leaning at his feet, really helped us to be able to focus on what policy required or what policy requirements, need to be embedded. So our platform is really built on policy. Number one is data component. Some of the things that we haven't mentioned, but, it's critical is like everything is encrypted. So we start off with wanting to ensure and protect consumers' data. So no, I can't go into the back end while I'm the founder and owner to be able to even see my own data in the back end because it's encrypted. So, just really basically starting at the fundamental level. And then as we start leveling up, the data in one centralized place. Also, we have done some work, excited to roll out in version 2. It's around things that have become really topical in this ecosystem, and what we're going through is things like appraisal. What does the appraisal experience look like? Has been, a lot of conversation around appraisal bias. And what is appraisal bias? Basically, it says that, hey, if you're from a marginalized community, there is a possibility that your home may be undervalued based on where you live, based on who your neighbors are, all those kinds of stuff. And so in version 2 that we're building, and again, really from a policy framework, is that we've worked with some of the organizations who have defined. So we've talked to appraisers, we've talked to some folks in DC who are really focused on appraisal, and we've developed a framework around how it is built into keeping me. But I would say more than that, for me, because home ownership, we've been taught, when we are young, you go to school, you get the education, you get older, you get married, you get the kids, and then you get the house and you get the car. But one of the things, that we haven't really taught people is like, okay, once you close on that house, how do you manage it? How do you ensure that you have the documents and the details? And how do you ensure that, it becomes an asset? When you start weeding through the statistics and the details of, home ownership, you realize that the numbers are really pretty low still for the African-American community. So somewhere like, I read a stat recently that says, the African-American home ownership rate has never reached 50% in the United States. And that is interesting because the highest it ever got to was 49.7%. And that was in 2004. Here we are in 2024, and the rate has fallen back to 45.5%. And there are other initiatives that are out there, so some that, I am advocating for actively, things like what the special purpose credit programs, what gives down payment assistance to minority communities. And I do believe that some of these solutions and these policies would really help create better policies in the housing sphere. But I think that ultimately what I say to people is that post-closing, home ownership requires the tools. And so that's one of the things why we're building so actively around what we're building for. Because, when you buy a stock, you're able to see how your stock goes up and down. You're able to manipulate, okay, well, I can sell at this rate, I can put a put, I can put a call, I can do this, I can do that. But ultimately, when you have a home, as a country, the US is averaging somewhere between $30 and $60 billion per year on emergency repairs. How do we reduce that? Reducing emergency repairs also has to do a lot with maintenance. So if you're doing routine maintenance, then it reduces the cost of maintenance repairs. So there are things like that that we hope to be able to really thread the needle to be able to create better solutions. And we do believe it's really grounded in a policy framework.
I love that. And one of the things that astounds me is both in the US and here in the UK that children or students leave school, but they don't know how to run a home. They don't know how to budget. They don't know how to manage their money. These are fundamental life skills, and I can't believe that we don't arm people with that right information that they need to succeed. And Jillian, with your background in home and lifestyle, how have you influenced the development and user experience of Keepingly? Because I would imagine you would come at this from a slightly different angle. Would that be right?
Yeah, but I mean, I really do. The policy angle is one thing. Data, like when some of the data points that Daniel just gave you, being like homeownership, home, emergency home repairs being $1 billion business, coming from those kinds of data points as well, right?
Yeah.
Again, why the concept resonated with me is because I had a couple of shared pain points with the user. I'm lucky to be in my own home, but like when I purchased, I didn't think anything about it beyond the purchase. And I've heard so many homeownership horror stories. And the fact of the matter is that as homeowners, we just kind of like luck into a good experience and aren't really prepared for the reality of maintenance and what that can cost in the event of an emergency. And I, as I mentioned to you earlier, I still want that handhold like experience. I've been a homeowner for 13 years now, and the platform I'm building is the thing that I desperately wanted, even as I'm looking at whether or not I can buy a second property, again, that advice, those recommendations, whether it be things to do, the maintenance, or even further down as we build the property, because we're looking at maintenance from a physical perspective, but also a financial perspective, right? Again, and we're in the process of getting all of that data and analyzing it, right? So it's how do you manage this asset, managing the asset holistically, right? I remember Daniel at the beginning of the process had mentioned to me, that during COVID he had made some adjustments to his home and just taken advantage of the market. And I was like, how do you do that? How do you know to make these decisions, and how do you know to jump on this opportunity? So it's all of those types of recommendations that we're thinking about. I've come to it as well, of having the experience of having to like wade through documents when a loved one has passed, and now you have to figure out what to do with this property. Where are the documents? How do I get this? Where to go? So we have crafted the experiences around those pain points. If you're a new homeowner, do this. If you've already lived in this house for this amount of time, do this. If you've had this event, do this. And so the platform makes documenting the home, again, from the maintenance and the financial perspective, more accessible. Okay, as Daniel mentioned, it's a centralized place, and we're really working on making those recommendations super specific, super time sensitive, right? So that they're not just generic, clean here, clean there, but really, really specific to the age of your home, where you live, time in the home, stuff like that. So again, it's really about getting all of that data together. And as Daniel mentioned, homeowners of color actually get lower property values on their appraisals. So again, how do we change the behavior? That's the hardest part in the experience, really. How do we change the behavior? Because we can get users and consumers to understand the value of this product in the event of an emergency. But then my core function is figuring out how do we get users to change their thinking and change their behavior around homeownership, right? Because they're going from not being accustomed to doing anything at all, or hardly anything, to it being a part of their lifestyle, And I see, even in my neighborhood, I see homes there's one home in particular that I walk past every day that it's like falling down around the ears, but it's always heavily decorated around Halloween and Christmas. And I always if I could just talk to that homeowner and shift their perspective a little bit, and then even just speaking of speaking to homeowners, I had a conversation with a gentleman in a hardware store. I was just sort of eavesdropping on his conversation, really, but this product has made me do that. And he was, he did all of his maintenance things himself, right? He's one of those old school do-it-yourself guys. And he said to me point blank, when I die, my kids cannot afford to keep this house because they have no idea what it costs, no idea the kind of time and money that I've put into it for it to be the home that it is now, to what I put into it to take it from where it was when I got it to what it is now, And so there's a huge educational piece around the product as well, right? In terms of if you're a do-it-yourselfer, if you just want advice on what the market is doing. Again, we've talked about the maintenance, we've talked about time-sensitive notifications, and then I'm constantly looking at how can we use technology to make that homeownership user manual piece better? How can we use technology to do things that we're currently unable to do, right? I'm not an advocate of using technology for just the sake of using technology, right? It has to be in service to our thesis, which is homeownership sustainability.
So many powerful points in both of your answers there. And as this is a daily tech podcast, a question I've got to ask, I'll ask it both of you, but Daniel, I'll throw this to you first. How do you see technology evolving in the housing sector, and what role do you see Keepingly playing in that evolution as technology advances too?
So, well, the thesis of homeownership sustainability, which, Jillian mentioned, is core to how we believe. I think that is going to become core and center to a lot of what happens in the ecosystem as we move forward. And technology becomes central to, since homeownership sustainability, because a large part of the first part of how we think of homeownership is really getting people in homes. Once we get them in homes, baby bathtub, no details or documentation. So the shift is that we believe happens is that there's a lot more documentation, there's a lot more details, there's a lot more reframing of, perspectives and how consumers view the home as an asset. Because, what our mobiles or having mobile phones have taught us is that, hey, everything is there. Everything is on the go. Everything is really accessible. And for the largest asset category in the world, we've kind of been behind on some of that. So I do believe that technology allows us to shift and really catch up and be able to, start documenting and taking a lot more of these details into the homeownership journey. And the part for us that I see Keepingly playing is that I do believe, and it is our objective to be centralized or central to how the homeownership journey and experience evolves, where, if we compare it to something like Zillow, they started with the democratization of data. Before Zillow existed, you couldn't really go on and figure out what was the estimate on your home or understand what was about. They've kind of blown that, really out of the water in terms of really providing all the details. Now, where Keepingly hopes to do, I would say similar, is now once you're in the home, being able to give you the tools to be able to now build upon what you've gotten in the first phase of being able to understand. So we do believe that a shift is going to take place, whether or not, it's pushing the market forward, which, we've kind of had to start to do, because evolution and change is sometimes hard. I've had people say to me, hey, well, this is the way we manage our homes and we don't think that way. But when you want to, if it becomes understanding what your data is so that you can be able to sell your home for a higher valuation, if the person coming into your home say, hey, Neil, I'm not buying that house from you unless I understand exactly what you've done in your home. And, it now forces you to actually have to either document everything. So you go and you find all the documents and you put it in there. And so it helps the prospective owner coming in make a better decision, because nobody wants to be that person. And I've lived this, number one, I've gotten lowballed on a valuation. I had to spend a ton more money than we expected in the beginning. But then, a year into home ownership, you're having to go replace a fridge, or you have to go replace something else, or something breaks. And so, like Jillian was mentioning, there's so many horror stories of homeowners. I just saw recently that there's a lawsuit against manufacturers of fridges, because these fridges sometimes die way ahead of the expected life expectancy. And so those kinds of experiences, yesterday there was a report from Newsweek that says 90% of new homeowners who are millennials have expressed buyer's remorse from home ownership or buying their home. And that's a really high number when you think of it. You work all your life to buy a home, and now you have buyer's remorse. And so what we do believe is that by having more data democracy, by more transparency, we are able to push the industry forward and really helping people to make better decisions, so that home ownership sustainability, where you're able to pass on the asset to the next owner, and you're able to get the value out of it. Because who says that home ownership really provides generational wealth? Or who says that the return on investment on home ownership is really a thing? Because we don't have the numbers. And, in the US, we're dealing with things like climate change, we're dealing with increased property taxes. When your insurance rate jumps like a few $1,000s within a year, okay, well, can I really afford that home? And where you started off when you bought it versus where you are now, is it really a worthwhile investment? And it may be, but because we don't have the data and the figures, we can't really say for certain, okay, well, this is a 20% value increase, or this is a 5% negative, in terms of what my valuation is, or how much I've actually put into it. And so the way that we really see this evolving, we hope that it becomes standard in the industry, where ultimately all the documents, all the things that you've done, the actual condition of the property becomes standard, either for the current owner, the future owner, or just anybody who actually wants to understand what property values and condition are of the property at any point in time.
To the point of that article that you were just referencing, where most millennials have buyer's remorse, and it's around their interest rate, right? And that's an interesting perspective to me, because interest rates are high now, but then when they go down, there'll be a lot of demand for homes. So it's six of one, half a dozen of the other. You're either going to pay a higher interest rate or pay a lot for that home. And you have to be able to weigh those two. It's not just about saying, unless they're in like adjustable rate, unless they don't have like fixed rate mortgages and it's an adjustable rate one where it goes up over time. All of that information is information that they could get through our platform as education, right? Really understanding the market and what it means. It's not just to say that, okay, I regret buying this because I'm paying a lot. You're paying a lot either way, right? And so understanding that and understanding, well, okay, how will my property value increase over time? What are the pros and cons of homeownership? And like really understanding those things, so that you're not making false judgments on things that could in the long run benefit you, just because in the short run, it's a little bit more of a difficult path. There's a lot of stuff happening in terms of smart homes. Daniel mentioned the Internet of Things. And if you notice, it's all around entertainment. I'm pretty excited about what virtual reality and augmented reality can do in terms of allowing a homeowner to pre-see or foresee what the value of a renovation might be before they make it. I know blockchain is working on like making property records more transparent, but I just wanted to be clear that we're not, from a product perspective, not taking technology for the sake of technology. It's really about taking that deep subject matter expertise in homeownership and looking for areas where technology can help us do things for the homeowner that they weren't able to do before. See, again, in the context of seeing it as an asset, seeing information, getting information they weren't able to get before, so they can make more informed decisions around the home.
And looking to the future and what you're doing now and everything you're building towards, are there any strategies that you're implementing at Keepingly to promote things like diversity, equity, inclusion, and of course, belonging. When we're talking about home ownership here, there's nothing more important than belonging. But is there anything that you're implementing around that within your team and inside the platform too that you can share?
Well, we're a very small team for starters, right? But for me, it's not about the labels. Yeah. It's about finding people who have that shared experience with the homeowner, who have lived those pain points. Because I think that's the most valuable perspective to come to this product with, right? So you're not just making assumptions about who the customer is and what they feel. You've lived and you have real empathy with the homeowners. Again, because homeowners of color tend to have more challenges with homeownership in terms of the lowballing on appraisals or even getting loans for that matter. Our team is going to need to be a very diverse team. But then from a product and user experience perspective, that is also true, right? If your product team isn't diverse, then who are you, designing for, right? So those two things really dictate that we have a diverse team outside of the appearance of diversity and equity and inclusion and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And you've both had hugely successful careers, and we will have a lot of people listening, a lot of startup founders at various stages of their career and business leaders, etc. And prop tech is, in particular, an exciting space right now. So finally, I asked this to both of you, but Daniel, to begin with, any advice that you'd give to any aspiring entrepreneur looking to make a difference in the prop tech space? Anything you'd pass down?
I would say build with policy in mind. And it's an interesting perspective because one of the things, being in tech as long as I have, I've grown up with the likes of watching, Zuck, who is like 2-3 years older than me, and a few others in the tech space. And you realize one of the things that I realize, is that we in technology love to build technology for ourselves. But I think that we have reverse engineered this, and we're number one, we're the target customers. So we're building a product that is focused on us. So understanding who your customer is really important. But the reason I said build from a policy perspective, especially in prop tech, is that there are not enough people from a technology standpoint building tech products and prop tech with policy in mind. So there are a lot of different products that go towards, we'll try to cut out the middleman, or we'll try to cut out the agent and stuff like that because we want the commissions, or we think that we get. But, one of those things that I've realized is that cutting out the agent out of a process of buying a house means that you may not have that experience and expertise that you need for the transaction. So for me, I'm like, I don't necessarily think that cutting an agent out is, but again, if you're not building from a policy framework and a policy standpoint. So the first place I would say prop tech entrepreneurs really think about policy, really think about how your solution, and then also don't only build for yourself in terms of, okay, well, this is a nice solution for Daniel, how can I build it? No, build from a perspective of what does the market need? What does the market want? But sometimes, also counterintuitively knowing that the market doesn't necessarily always understand what it wants. So you have to kind of yin yang in terms of your building, and really, if you have a position also, ultimately, my number one advice to our founders is have no ego going into this. Whether or not it's prop tech or whatever, you have to be willing to be wrong, to be able to take advice, be able to understand that users may not like, I've had so many conversations, people were like, yeah, this may not work. Yeah, ultimately, there are going to be elements of this that will evolve. So again, it's not personal, it's about what the market needs. And so a large part of being an entrepreneur ultimately is being able sometimes to have no ego and really building out a solution that can meet the needs of your consumer and the market.
Brilliant advice. Absolutely fantastic. And Jillian, anything you'd like to pass down to any aspiring entrepreneurs wanting to make a difference in the prop tech space?
Definitely. I think what Daniel is saying is spot on, but what he's ultimately saying is also solve a real problem, right? As an entrepreneur, the journey is long and it's hard. And so technology shifts on a dime, the market shifts on a dime. But at Keepingly, we have a thesis that there's a specific problem that we're trying to solve, right? And that comes before the policy. Because of the problem, we know, okay, our way in is the policy, and our way to the execution is the data and the technology. But solve a real problem. In entrepreneurship, you're often forced to get to revenue really quickly, especially when you have investors. And because of that, you tend to get products that are more entertainment, right? Like with the Internet of Things and smart homes and all of that stuff, you see a lot of products that turn your lights pink and turn on the music and do the this and do the that, and those things are great. I'm not knocking any of those things, but if you want to be able to withstand the journey itself, you have to be true to the problem that you're solving, and then of course, in service to that, leverage technology wisely, because that also changes on a dime.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely love it. And what a great conversation with both of you today. So many big takeaways. But before I let you go, I want to find out a little bit more about you both, have a little fun with you before I let you go. So, Daniel, to begin with, some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or listened to this podcast. Is there a person you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with? Who would it be and why? He or she might just be listening to this, but let's see if we can manifest something together. Who would that person be?
Neil, I would love for that to happen. But Mark Cuban comes to mind. Yeah. For what he did, in terms of startup, broadcast.com and stuff like that. And then as an NBA fan, looking at how he's, kind of revolutionized the Mavericks, turned them from a really bad team into, that. And then even his recent selling of part of the team, but still retaining management of ownership of that. Also some of his work on, pharmaceutical drugs and what he's gone into recently, for me, and then his biggest takeaway for me personally is how he's doubled down on diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging, and, his real stance in terms of how that makes business better. I ultimately believe that those things are critical in leadership as we go forward. Diversity of thought, diversity of, who sits at the table, because so many of communities face, the effects of not being at the table around how decisions are made. And so I think that Mark Cuban has been one of the leaders in terms of being able to do this and do it quite successfully. So that would be, if you can hook me up, Neil, would be appreciative. But yeah.
Well, I can't make you any promises, but I am going to put it out into the universe. We'll put it out into the ether. Let's see what we can make happen there. Just let me know. Mark Cuban, if you are listening, you know what you need to do right now. And Jillian, for yourself here, I think we all feel like there's a certain amount of pressure to be in a state of continuous learning. And you're right in the heart of this prop tech space. I've got to ask, how or where do you self-educate? Because again, I think it'll be incredibly helpful for people listening.
Everything's a teacher, really, right? I mean, Daniel sends us 1 million articles per day on what's happening in the market. My focus right now, I'm actually just finishing up a course on AI in terms of trying to figure out how does that factor into Keepingly? How do we use it to combat bias? How do we use it to get to massage the data, right? When you're working in technology, something that you've learned today will be obsolete maybe in a couple years if you're lucky. And so there's always this constant need. You just have to be comfortable with change and constantly upgrading, right? Constantly being ahead of the curve for the product, because we want to have a product that is relevant and a product that moves with technology. Podcasts courses, whatever. And I took this particular course I'm taking because I'm trying to solve a particular problem within the app. And so again, it comes back to solving the real problem and knowing what you want to solve. Is, okay, I'm going to do this one thing, and then I look for research that helps me solve that problem. And then you're on to the next problem, and you're on to the next problem. As we start to get more users in, we're going to incorporate feedback and their pain points. And again, those inform what we build and how we build it. And if we have to build technology to do it, then we're going to have to do that. And so it's all about constantly evolving.
Wow, it's going to keep you incredibly busy, this path that you're both on. And Daniel, to begin with, can you just remind everyone listening where they can find out more information about Keepingly and where they can connect with you as well if they do have any questions for you personally?
So you can find us at keepingly.co. That's our website. You can sign up to the app. And to find me, I am available via email. Neil might have 1 million users that might be emailing me, but I'm going to put it out there. Daniel at keepingly.co, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Daniel Smith MBA. And, wherever else, we have our own podcast, so you can, check out our Keep Wise with Keepingly podcast, where again, we focused on education, Neil. And so we started our own podcast, which ranked as one of the top 20 podcasts for homeowners last year, based on FeedSpot. So we have been, doing the work around making sure that we are focused on the homeowners. So yeah, those are some of the places that you can find us. And, we continue to hope that we do great work and, would love to have the feedback to continue to push us and the momentum, to help us grow and engage with users of the brand.
Awesome. Well, I'll get a link added to the podcast, the website, and your LinkedIn profile. And Jillian, anywhere you'd like to point anyone listening who's got any questions for you?
LinkedIn is the best place to find me. Jillian Marie Harris is my handle at LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm always there. Awesome.
Well, I'll add links to everything so people can find you both nice and easy. I do urge people to check you out. And I always say at the end of every episode, technology works best when it brings people together. And the reason I record this podcast every day is getting people thinking differently about how technology can help them, and especially in areas that they don't associate with technology. And I just love how you're making waves with this trusted PropTech platform and ultimately revolutionizing how homeowners can manage, maintain, pay, and keep records of all their home services and expenses. Love what you're doing. I'd love to see how this continues to evolve for you. But just a big thank you to you both, Daniel and Jillian, for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Neil.
Thank you so much, Neil. It was a pleasure to chat with you.
So as we wrap up today's conversation with Daniel and Jillian from Keepingly, I think we're left to ponder the profound impact of technology on home ownership. And for me, Keepingly is not just a platform, it's more of a movement towards a more informed, equitable and streamlined approach to managing one of our most significant assets. In fact, the biggest asset that most people will have in their lifetime. Yes, our homes. The roof over our heads. From advocating policy changes to integrating cutting-edge tech solutions, Daniel and Jillian are right at the forefront of a shift of how we view and interact with our homes. But what does this mean for the future of housing, especially in marginalised communities? And how can we as individuals and as a society better leverage technology to foster a more sustainable and equitable home ownership? So many big talking points in our conversation today. Share with me your thoughts by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. Let's continue this conversation about everything from innovation, policy, and the path to a better living environment for all. Other than that, I will be back bright and early tomorrow with another topic and another debate for you all. But thank you for listening today, and until next time, don't be a stranger.